Hi, and welcome to a new Plugin Guru video. My name is John Skippy Limcool, and we have a special guest today for this Thursday video. Say hi to Steve Duda. Hi, Steve.
Hey, John.
How are you doing today?
Oh, doing good. It's actually my birthday.
Today is your birthday.
Yeah.
We're doing this on the 13th to release on the 16th. The 16th is my birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We didn't know this.
No. Well, happy birthday to you in advance.
Well, happy birthday to you right now.
Oh, thank you.
That's quite awesome. Well, what a history. So I looked back at old emails and realized, let me look at my notes here. March 22nd, 2011, I bought LFO Tool.
Nice.
I wanted to do a video on it and it hadn't downloaded yet. And I sent you an email saying...
Yeah, I think that was definitely the old website. I think that we were just working on trying to get everything to be automatic.
Right.
Early on, I would actually send people their software when they bought it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, obviously you go back years as well. You remember when a lot of stuff was
yes.
like that, but you'd buy it and you'd have to wait. Sometimes it would be 72 hours. You're like, dude, where's my thing?
Yeah. You on the please wait for us to authorize your purchase. And I wrote you an email. I'm gonna play a minute of this. Fish. Remember your song Fish?
Yep. That was funny.
And you had a thing where if you bought LFO Tool, you got, or if you bought Fish, you got LFO Tool on sale or something, if I recall.
Actually, it was you got LFO Tool for free. So what I did was when I released this EP on Beatport, it was Fish plus some remixes. So
right.
It was like four song EP. I was like, you buy this EP, I'll gift you LFO Tool.
Right.
And that was definitely by hand. I had to personally like do every single one of those manually, and it was a bit of a pain. But
right.
I put the EP on the top 100 on Beatport by far. It was almost got to the top 10.
Right.
And then Beatport noticed, because what they really cared about more than people buying stuff, they cared about signups, because
right.
you know, you have some average number of songs that people buy over the course of being signed up for it. So they saw all these new accounts coming in, and they're like, why are we getting all these new accounts, like way more than normal? And then what are they buying? And they saw it was my EP, and then they found out about the promo I did for the free plugin. And they're like, it was really clever.
It was very clever.
And it was sort of an experiment, and it actually worked out really well, because I thought maybe these 1,000 some odd people, you know, maybe I just shorted myself a lot of money, because I was only making, I don't know, $6 on the EP or something. Like, it wasn't, after Beatport's cut and everything, it wasn't that much money. But
now they're customers of yours, though.
Brand new,
so.
But it spread it around. It spread to people like you and to a bunch of people that
right.
maybe wouldn't have bought it otherwise.
Right.
They could turn up a good deal.
Yeah. No, I wrote to you asking permission to play that in the video on YouTube.
Oh, okay, cool.
And that was before YouTube had their music licensing, check the song for copyright and refusal and all that stuff that happens now.
Right.
So it was really interesting that was how everything started. I want to make it clear to customers. I think a lot of people don't realize this. You mentioned to me November 10th, 2012, that you were working on a synth.
Sounds about right. That must have been right after I started it.
Yeah, right when you started it. The first beta that you sent to me before it went to the public beta was 2 years later, almost, in July 26, 2014.
Sounds about right as well. It took a while to get there.
It took like 2.5 years of work. This isn't something, I want you guys to realize, everybody that torrents this for free, this is not something that Steve just over the weekend said, hey, let's do this. And, you know, a month later it was done. This is years of work.
That's right. I mean, some of that could have been shortened if I really knew what it was I was trying to make. I mean,
yeah.
You know, if
it's
I really
process. It's jazz. Yeah. You start here. It's bouncing off ideas. It's interacting with people, but it takes time for this to happen. And finally, after mentioning this on November 2012, September 2014, like 2 years later or so, you released the first version of Serum. And 2 years later, you're still working on it. I mean, it's not like one of these overnight flash in the pan ideas. So You must
Yes.
respect these guys that create these instruments. And, you know, it takes me months to work on libraries, and I've got 25 years of experience doing it. Nothing comes for free. So
Thanks. Yeah.
just think about that, you know?
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it's a two-way street too, as well. I feel obligated to the customers that support me because they're
Right.
quite literally putting food on my table. I mean, well, not literally, but very
Well,
close to
they're
it.
giving you what it takes to
Like
get
I
the
don't have
food to put it
Xerox
on the.
machines. I don't have office fees. I don't, I keep
Right.
my costs really low, and so the money that coming in really is putting food on the table.
Right.
So I feel indebted to the people who support me
Right.
back to. And
Oh,
so
me too. You and I are so much in similar parallels with what we're doing in different. I mean, you're creating instruments to inspire people, and I feed sounds into them to inspire people. But yeah, this is our livelihood. This is full time. It's not like you stop this and go work somewhere else. So it's just I want people to understand and respect that this is what we've devoted our lives to, and to shortchange that is not fair. I don't want to make a big deal. I'm not a big. I believe very much in the cycle of life with the web, and you know, everybody torrents at one age, and then you grow up and go, hey, I want to own my own software and my own sounds, but realize there's work involved to get to where Serum is where it's at. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that.
yes,
On that subject, I like to generally try to avoid that subject, right? Like I
yes,
really like to try to focus on the positive, which is that there's actually been a lot of people that have supported Serum and supported
yes,
me.
yes,
And so those people I feel indebted to, and that I've done over 90 updates, and like you said, the
right,
last 2 years that it's been out, it's still been my full-time thing. So I'm kind of at year 5 now on it.
right,
And as long as I can make just a living wage off of that, I'm content.
right,
But I do try to give back to those who support, and sometimes I see a lot of we've all experienced out there of making a purchase that you regret,
right,
whether it's something that you buy and then 2 weeks later they come out with a new version that they want your upgrade money,
right,
and so I make updates free for life because I really feel like because I've been that person who's purchased software so many times myself that I know what it feels like, and I know what it feels like to not feel appreciated. So
right,
I try to, I really take support seriously, and sometimes people freak out on that when it's 2 in the morning on a Saturday night.
right.
They
You
email
reply
me they have
back.
a bug, and then I email them a fix
Yeah,
before Sunday morning rolls around. They're like, I can't believe that the programmer is answering me on a weekend and issuing a fix for my little
right,
stupid bug. But I try to do what I can to keep everyone happy, and it's not just to bring more business my way. It's really to try to complete that cycle that you're sort of talking about, which is
right,
like I don't want people to regret supporting
right.
me.
You want to be happy customers, because happy customers come back and are going to say, "Oh, what's nerve? Wait,
That that
you
and
know?
it just feels like a complete transaction to me at that point.
Yeah,
I don't want to just be given something I don't deserve and all that. So
right, right.
win-win kind of thing. So
Win-win.
anyway, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good news. Well, let's do this. Speaking of updates, let's cover the new things in the update, and then after that, I have some questions. Some other customers and myself have come up with to ask you. But the new update has some kind of significant additions added to it that I thought definitely warranted more than just a README on the web page. And
Yeah.
you were kind enough to agree to come along and email friends for a long time. But this is the first time we've met in person, so
That's right.
it's a good time to bring up the new things. And it's not like they're like, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden it's going to make your breakfast or something. But
Well, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about some of these updates. I know some people will like a couple of the features in here. There's nothing I'd say like mind blowing in here, but there's some stuff that's really cool
yes,
that will extend the functionality of Serum.
right,
And there's some things that I really wanted to put in here, which are a little more of the super exciting, mind blowing things, but I've just deferred them to a future update because I don't want to release things that are premature, and I also don't want to pile in too many things in any one release,
right.
because then
There's a lot of things. When we get to there's a section we're going to talk about Easter eggs. And there's a reason I have a PNG on the desktop, and there's a reason I have well, we'll talk about the samples folder in a minute, because the noise oscillators got a couple really nice updates in this new update. All right, so the first thing in this update, you'll notice that there's, if you've done the README and you've heard about it, there's 8 LFOs now. And you don't see 8 LFOs when you call up Serum. It still only shows 4. But if you click and drag the number 4 LFO to modulate anything, bang, number 5 shows up. So they're hidden until you need them, that's how it should be. It's just, and if you modulate number 5, and then you modulate number 6, go to 7, and the 8th one is cute because now you have these little buttons that you just click. Now there's 8 LFOs, and a whole bunch of them are being used as modulation sources. So that's great how you design that to not, the interface doesn't all of a sudden take over. It just grows dynamically.
Yeah, thanks. It was definitely, it looks a little much with all 8 LFOs on there, so it was something I thought would be necessary to just make it feel, you know, I always concern with any feature, and this might get a little silly, but I always feel like anything I add, there's a little voice inside me which is the naysayer of, you're making this too complicated. You're giving me things I don't want, or it was better before, right? And that's that's sort of the biggest fear, is you don't want someone to say that it used to be better.
Right.
So I've tried what I can to mitigate everything. And in fact, another concern, which would be on the more back end that you don't see, would be CPU use. So adding more LFOs, well, it does mean more CPU if you're using all 8, as you would expect. I mean, it's just
obviously,
more LFOs, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't taking more CPU if you're not using them. So not only was I able to do that, I actually found a couple of ways when I was doing some rewriting to actually optimize it further. So LFOs now take less CPU with no quality hit. They're still actually audio rate LFOs.
Right. So, that's very important.
Unlike a lot of synths will give you an LFO that is not audio rate, so it's calculating it once every 10 samples usually.
That's why your maximum speed stops at some point, you know.
Your frequency will stop at some point, but not only that, you get what they do is, because now it's stepping, you can imagine, say every so often it's recalculating an LFO value, but it's not every sample. So it's kind of basically, you could think of your LFO as going to sleep and then waking up and going, where am I? And it jumps ahead.
Right.
And so it's something's happened during that time. So what they do is, rather than calculating any of those intermediate values, which aren't really important anyway, is they calculate the new value, look at the old value, and now they're averaging. So they're filtering or smoothing your LFO signal out. And what ends up happening then is you don't get discrete jumps, which you may want, right? So you may want an LFO to turn from on to off so fast that you get a click. At least personally, I like things when they're as sharp and tight as possible, right?
Yes.
So the LFOs in Serum are actually audio rates. So you never have any of that smoothing going on unless you want it, which is why there's the smooth knob there, because sometimes you don't want to hear a click if your volume's turning on and off for like a trance gate pattern or something.
Right.
And so we might as well mention as an aside, some people, I always kind of throw out key command stuff when I'm talking about it, because some people don't read the manual or don't know this stuff, that to do trance gate like patterns with the LFO is very easy. You just want to use the shift key when you're drawing on the LFO, and it creates segments for you.
Exactly.
So you get a step sequencer like thing, and most people end up figuring that out at some point out of desire or whatever. But a number of people have asked for like a performer like feature, and majority of the time when someone wants like a performer like modulator, they don't realize that you can just hold down the shift key and do that. And you can actually even change the shape which appears when you use the shift key. If you control click or right click on the LFO, you can see it says shift key function, and you can select like a ramp shape or a ramp up shape.
Right.
So that way you can shift draw and get these sort of like, step sequence patterns to happen with just one click and drag of the mouse. You can get these interesting patterns to happen. So yeah, anyway, I like to mention that shift key and then the alt key as well to snap points to the grid division as well, which can be really useful for similar kind of stuff.
So yeah, so you use so if you say flat, now wherever you click and drag to create things is going to make flat timing events.
Yeah, when you shift, this is the shift key function. So yeah, whenever you hold down the shift key, you're now adding flat segments wherever you click.
But if you right click to choose a different setting, now it's like the paintbrush in Massive, where you're choosing between different up or down or flat.
Exactly.
So now you can use shift, and instead of being flat, you're getting the pulsing shapes and so forth.
Right.
And that's awesome.
So that little functionality is in there, and then so the alt, so that's the shift key, and then the alt key allows for snapping of points. So if you just grab a point and you're moving it around, if you hold alt, it'll snap to any grid segment location. So that's a way that you can sort of separately snap things vertically and or horizontally.
Right.
And then you can actually use both of those key modifiers at the same time. So shift alt will be drawing these segments, but snapping these segments vertically into a certain position.
Instead of just putting them...
It's just instead of free form. So that can be useful if you're mapping pitch to semitones or something like that.
And command is cool. If you hold down command to, it selects the node high and the low points so that you can move an entire shape somewhere.
Yeah, command is kind of funny. The concept there is actually to Command and drag, and then you'll see this rainbow of picks. All the points become like a rainbow.
Oh, right.
The more points you have, the easier it is to see that. And the idea there is it's something that deadmau5 asked for just because it existed in some 3D software and he thought it was a cool feature. Some people
cool.
actually say that they use this. I haven't found it too useful myself, but the idea is that it's giving you a relative strength selection. So in other words, where you start the selection from is going to be maximum strength, and as it grows out with the color shading, you're getting less strength. So when you then move these selected points, you'll see that they all move in a relative manner.
Right.
And so you get this sort of funny scaling effect.
Right.
It's neat. I don't find it too useful because now you're off the grid, right? So for anything rhythmic, now it's going to be kind of like a funny speed up or slow down kind of effect.
Right.
But that could be cool in of itself, I guess.
Yeah, it can do all those kind of like stutter, slow down, speed up, slow down.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, the LFOs have a whole lot to offer. So now there's 8 of them instead of 4. So that's very nice to have. I was talking to you earlier. Say that somebody, because a lot of people I know would want to like switch from one LFO shape to another LFO shape.
Yeah.
What would be the easiest way to do that?
Okay, well, one thing that you can do that's not readily obvious is that you can copy LFOs from one to another. So if you take the Alt key and you click the actual tile, like where it says LFO1 above the LFO, and you drag that with the Alt key held down to LFO2, now it's made a copy of LFO1 into the LFO2 location. Right. So that's a quick way if you want to, say, use an LFO but then make a variation or whatnot. So that availability is there. But there's a little folder button that you'll notice right below on the left side of the LFO.
Yes.
So the folder button allows you to load and save shapes. So that's a way that you can easily get to a default if you want just a ramp or a flat or any kind of basic shape to just you want to clear and start over. That's where you do that.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's where.
So if we have LFO1 being one shape and we have LFO2 being the other shape.
Right. If you want to crossfade those now to say, hey, I want this macro knob, say, to control whether we're hearing LFO1 or LFO2. So you can do that, and you have to do that in the mod matrix. So step 1 would be to assign both these LFOs to control the same parameter, whether it's filter cutoff or whatever it is. And then now you'll see those 2 entries in the mod matrix. You'll see LFO1 to cut off, and you'll see LFO2 to cut off. Then you select aux source, which is the right side of the matrix. Okay,
let me do this real quick. I'm going to assign this to the filter, and LFO2 is going to be a different shape. So let's say a dome, but let's have it be a piercing dome like that, let's say. Actually, we'll make it a pulse like that. So we've got 2 different shapes, and they're both assigning to the LFO, or to the filter cutoff.
Great.
Okay.
So now at that point, they should both have an amount. Now you can go to the matrix tab, and you should see that they both have amount sliders up, I assume.
Right.
Right. And then, but then there's the aux source over on the right, and the aux source is how you can scale the amount of an LFO from a different control. So you might want a velocity to affect how much LFO you hear, or mod wheel, or whatever. So what we're going to do here is we're going to select the same aux source for both of these 2 assignments.
Say macro 1 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So macro 1 on both of those. And then there's one step left, which is that we want to invert one of these.
For the curve or the value, right?
In the mod column,
you'll
see a star. And then if you click the star, and then there's an option that says star parentheses inv.
Right.
And so what that's doing is that's saying use the aux source inverted. So if macro 1, say, is at 0%, the invert's going to make it treat it like it's 100%.
100%. So it's the opposite value. So they're going to be negating from each other from 0 to 100 values.
When 0, 1's 100%, and the other 0, and then vice versa. When the knob's at 100%, now 1's going to be 100%, the other will be 0%. So this allows us to crossfade using this macro knob now. So we're going to hear, if the macro knob's at 50%, we'll be hearing both LFOs affecting the cutoff.
So we're going to have one at 16th notes and one at 8th notes. And we're switching between this LFO shape. Or anywhere in between. Get some really cool, interesting.
Get a combination of half of both.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so there's your trick, because everybody's going to want to change from one LFO shape to another LFO shape in the sound, changing wavetables and so forth. And
that's sounds like a lot of steps, but once you've done it a couple times, it's really quick because you're just making the assignment and then you're just 2 selections on the aux source menu and 1 invert. So it's really, it's
just the trick is to make sure your auxiliary source is the same for both. So if it's a modulation source or the mod wheel or velocity, that you do it to both, and then you just set one to be the inverted value of the other, and boom,
you're done. Yeah,
sweet.
So there's that, and yeah, so that's a neat feature. There's there's a one hidden thing that while we're on the subject of the mod matrix, people have asked for a way to bypass, because sometimes you might make an assignment, and you can actually do this over on the main page as well. There's actually a few different ways to bypass modulators. I don't know if you've ever control clicked, say you have these 2 assignments on cutoff.
Right.
You can control click on the cutoff knob itself, and you can see bypass modulator.
Bypass all destinations.
Yeah, so you can bypass all. That would be on the LFO. It should say bypass all destinations. Or on the cutoff knob, you should see bypass modulator LFO1 or LFO2. But anyway, there's
bypass
another
modulator.
Yeah, so that'll just show you whichever modulator is selected right now to be able to bypass it. So that's a quick way, because sometimes people want to A and B something being off, but they don't want to actually remove the modulator and lose the assignment.
Let me confirm something really quick. So if I had, let's say, envelope 2 also controlling the filter cutoff.
Yep.
So we have 2 different sources. So now when I right click on the cutoff knob, I don't see bypass for filter for LFO and envelope. It just now says
it's going to show it for whichever modulator is selected.
Oh, you have to select it down here, and that's going to now give you the chance to come up here and say bypass.
Yeah.
Now you're just going to hear envelope 2. Gotcha.
Right. So that's the way. And so really what's changed in the new version is now there's yet another way to bypass, which is over in the matrix.
Okay. Go to the matrix.
So if you're hanging out in the matrix and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want this one assignment or not.
Right.
You can just alt click on where it says mod, where that asterisk is, and it'll just flip it to bypass. So it saves you from visiting the menu. It basically just toggles it between asterisk being normal.
Oh, okay. So it's just a quick way to do a mute, basically.
Yes, exactly.
You can get the same thing if you hold down the button and go down to bypass and select it, because that's still there. But
it's just a little power user
trick. We like those.
The new version, yeah. So yeah, that's good
to know.
There's a couple little hidden things like that.
Other things on the LFO, you were telling me this earlier. I love this. The ability to take an LFO shape and make it a waveform.
Right. So that's a little hidden kind of Easter egg, I guess you could say.
So let's make a complex, crazy waveform here, because we can't see what Steve's doing. But if I made this into a waveform shape like this, right? And I want that now to be my synth waveform sound. What was my steps?
You alt drag it.
So you go hold down Option or Alt. Go to LFO1, the box, drag it to which of the 2 oscillators you want, and let go, and boom. There you go. Cool.
You can now hear your LFO shape as an oscillator.
Oscillator shape as an oscillator.
It's no longer a low frequency.
Right.
So yeah, that's like a neat little Easter egg.
Right.
You know, I don't know how useful that is, but it's kind of cool that you can do that.
Cool.
There's obviously a whole bunch of wave editing and draw features in the actual wavetable editor.
Right.
So that's something I didn't even document in the original documentation, because I just thought it was sort of a silly bonus.
Right. But there you go.
You can do that.
Well, the new one is the graphics for the waveforms. And what's the rule for that?
Oh, okay. So for the PNGs, which was added in the 1.1 release, you can drag and drop a PNG file, which is just a standard graphics file, onto the oscillator, and it's going to import it. So what should happen is as you drag the file over the oscillator, it should say import as PNG.
Right.
And then when you let go, it's converting the luminance, which is sort of like the grayscale pixel brightness, into amplitudes.
So there's the waveform displayed now.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the 3D view of the waveform, you should see something that kind of represents your image.
Right.
Especially if your image is
contrasting. Yeah, I just took the Plugin Guru logo, and there it is as a wavetable now. So we can play it. From really narrow to fat and chunky. So cool.
Nice. Yeah, it's fun to mess with that. You can do some interesting things I've heard people do with, like, skew lines. Like if you draw in Photoshop with lines that kind of intersect, you'll get PWM-like effects as those 2 points are converging in the separate frames of the wavetail. So it's kind of fun.
Awesome. Okay, so we've covered LFO, and we now have again, as you see, there's only 4 until you assign number 4 to something, and now you get new LFOs will show up. So that's how they're there when you need them when you've gone beyond 4. So you don't want to do that unless you need more than 4. So powerful and cool. Next, the noise oscillator has some new things added to it.
That's right. Yeah, I've had a few people request it. I try to kind of look for consensus on what people ask for. And I've had a few people ask, they say, you know, it'd be really nice if I didn't have to like move these samples into the noises folder. So to take a step back, the noise oscillator in Serum allows you to load standard wave files.
Right.
It's always allowed you to do that, but you'd have to actually drop these wave files into the Serum presets / noises.
So you could click and select them. Yeah.
Then you have to go select it. And now if you're collaborating with a buddy or trying to make presets to sell, now you'd have to also include those wave files and they need to be in the same location in the destination user's machine.
Right.
So, or else you get these noises missing messages and all that. So people are like, you know, I really don't want to have to go through these steps. If there's like a sample I'd like to just have Serum play, it would be great if I could just drag and drop it into the noise oscillator. So now you can.
Right.
So you can use your host file browser or your, you know, Windows Explorer or Mac Finder and just drag WAV or AIF files right onto the name of the noise oscillator.
Right.
If it's enabled, and now it will just load it from that location. And at which point you'll be able to use those arrows to the right of the name to step through the next files in that folder. So you don't need to keep dragging and dropping if you want to just browse through a folder of samples. You just drag once, and now you can go next right there in this interface.
Let me initialize my preset real quick. So this, in action, I've got a folder for the new MegaMagic. Okay, so we've got to turn on the noise oscillator and turn on the keyboard. The key is a keyboard turned on, right?
That's pitch tracking, yeah.
Pitch tracking. And now turn off that and turn... Oh, I'm on envelope 2. That's what's going on. There. So these are new samples for the next... there's 2 libraries where I have taken the noise oscillator and used it as an oscillator source. There's MegaMagic Dreams and MegaMagic Pads. And in fact, you added the looping abilities so that we could do MegaMagic Pads with the full-size loops with the nice loops happening. And
that's right.
But now it's a really cool ability to drag over a sample. It's now able to read it. If you save this as a patch, it will actually save it into the patch, right?
That's right. So for anything that's dragged in, you'll notice the background of the name will turn a little bit bluish, which is the same thing it does when you edit wavetables. And so that bluish tint on the background is just a subtle way to say, hey, this is getting saved in your preset, saved in your song. You don't need to worry about it. So it sort of just means this is edited, custom, embedded data. So,
and it's also cool because that means that now this whole folder, there's 113 different sounds in this folder. I can arrow through them, go through them, and play them. So
that's right.
New guitars. And for this library, I'm going to include not only the really long 14-second versions, but also these dry versions. So you can... haven't selected the final ones yet, but having this tool ability inside of Serum is great to make it easier to go through without having to put them into a specific location before Serum knows what to do with them. So it's much smarter how it handles samples and what it can do with the samples when saving a patch. So that's really nice additions to everything else Serum can do already that is pretty insane.
Cool. Yeah, there's a couple subtleties that were improved along there. As you know, as we were discussing it, there was a fine-tuning kind of fix / enhancement where now it basically will scale regardless of the sample rate of the file that you import. You don't have to do any funny tuning business to try to get it to play at a perfect C. So it assumes basically the note's a C. You're going to have to still change a number of semitones if the root note isn't actually C, but there's no fine-tuning malarkey that you have to do anymore. If it's a 48K file, previously you had to tune it a certain amount, and even 44.1 was a little off. So now that's all taken care of, and old presets will still sound as they used to. So no need to, of course, go. I try to always make sure everything sounds the same from the past.
So what he's saying is when you change sample rates of your DAW workstation, And the samples are at a different sampling rate. There used to be this offset you would have to do. It wasn't calculating because you're at 44K and it's a 48K sample. But now it does it automatically inside, so you don't have to deal with that stuff anymore, which is nice.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually not the DAW sample rate is something that has to be taken into consideration all the time. What's really changed is the source file sample rate used to be ignored essentially, right? I just paid no attention to it.
Right.
Which means then if you have, say a C note of a guitar, if you're not paying attention to the sample rate, then obviously it's going to have a different tuning.
Right.
Because there's more or less samples involved. So really, it should take that into consideration.
Right. So you're being aware of what sampling rate it was and then doing offsets based on that. So it's much smarter. Yeah,
it pre-calculates it all, so there's no hit at runtime as well. So
most awesome.
No additional CPU load. And
awesome.
Yeah, that's that. There's a couple other little enhancements. Some of them might be from previous version, but there's a few more little key command stuff that I've done. One that you mentioned was on the key tracking of the noise oscillator. Well, now if you type in 12 or whatever, it's no longer percent if key tracking is on it, so it's plus 12.
Oh, right.
Minus 12. So it reads that correctly. And there's a couple of really useful hidden ones that a lot of people don't know about. I'll mention two of them because they're probably the two that come up the most in terms of typing in values. And so,
by the way, to do that, you have to go to global and turn it on. So go to global and say double click for typable values on the controls. And that's how you can go to the fine tune or any other knob and just double click it and type in what value you want and it will put it into the knob. You can't do that without that parameter turned on. So
right. So yeah, so once you have that parameter enabled, and I think you might have to reopen the user interface for it to actually start working, but yeah, once you have that enabled and saved with the button at the top of the prefs, it'll
that's the other
thing.
There. Once you've set these buttons the way you want, hit this little folder right here that says update the preferences to use these new things every time it calls it up. Otherwise, it will go away when you call it up next time.
Feedback outlets, yeah. So, so once the typable values works and you double click on things and you can type, there's a few little handy, I call them like utility functions that generally I did a fair amount of work to try to make sure that whatever the number display that you see on the knob, that it gives you the same functionality when you type. But then there's a few things in addition to those typical things that are useful. So a good example is you on the envelope segments, you might want your decay time to last for an 1/8 note of your song. So you can actually do this by when you double click on the decay knob, you can type 1/8, like 1 divided by 8, like an 1/8. And what Serum will do is it'll look at your song's tempo and calculate the number of milliseconds required for that decay to be an 1/8 note.
Wow.
So that's a handy way
That's a cool trick.
So yeah, that's a handy way to get things for song purposes.
You have a clock calculator in the envelopes.
That's right. Yeah, you need to know how much delay time you need per millisecond. You could use Serum.
That's right.
But, yeah, so that's a handy little one. There is on the envelope segments. That a lot of people have asked, "Hey, I'd love tempo-based segments on the envelope," and it's like, well, guess what? You can.
1/16th, and now it's a 16th note decay.
Exactly. So that's a handy little one for people that don't speak milliseconds. you can speak time digits or time display. So the next one, which is similar, is over in the Matrix tab. Actually, before you do that, a common thing that people ask in Serum, because it's not very obvious, is, hey, I want this LFO to affect the pitch of all oscillators.
Right.
In other words, they want to do some kind of riser or sweep or something like that. And then very often they're like, well, I want this range to be a certain number of semitones. So this can all happen in the matrix. So if you go over to the matrix and pick a source, maybe like an unused LFO or something like that.
Okay.
So on a new empty slot there, you can say LFO3 or whatever LFO is not being used.
Right.
And then for destination, go to global to master tuning. So that's going to be the coarse pitch for all oscillators. So global master tuning is the destination.
Right.
And then the question is the amount. Well, how much amount? Because those numbers there are a percentage of the total range that it does,
right?
Which is 128 semitones, I believe. And that's not very useful. Well, it's a percentage, right? So it's showing you a percentage of that. So the math isn't very convenient if you wanted to do a specific number of semitones.
Right.
So long story short, what you can do here is double click on this depth slider that's between our assignments there, the amount slider, and then in that number box, put a number of semitones you want followed by ST, like semitones. So you can put 12 ST, and then you should see like a number 9 up here. It's actually 9 point something something, but That's doing a calculation for us of how many, what number value should be entered to get a specific number of semitones. So if you want your LFO to cover 2 octaves, you could double click, type 24 ST. Now you've got a 24 semitone range.
Right, since 128 is radical for a lot of cases. And tying into that, you'll want to go over to the LFO now and probably set it so that BPM is off, or maybe not, but you want it set to be envelope so it doesn't repeat. And then you can control the shape to be a nice riser shape. Slow it down. There you go. Okay. So that's how you would do the riser type effects quickly and easily to a certain range amount.
Yeah, you want
the
a specific
ST
number of
command.
semitones. Yeah, sometimes people like to draw little riffs and stuff like that too, right? They want a little octave bend or something like that. So that way you can set the range that your LFO is covering perfectly to an amount. No guesswork involved or anything.
And if it's global, it will do the volume or the master tune to everything, all the oscillators, everything all together.
Right. The master tune destination is OSC1, 2, sub, and noise oscillator if pitch rec is on, I believe.
Right.
Or actually overall. So
yes. Great.
Yeah.
A couple other things. I've had a lot of people ask about effect presets.
Right.
And that's something that's actually in now.
Right.
So, for example, if we go over to the MegaWav Evo patches, if you go to the effects page, a couple things. There's now a triangle by each of the effects so that you can save this as an effect setting. So if you like what a popular one is the compressor, because the OTT, nice aggressive edge, if you like the setting of a certain sound, you could save this, give it its name, Rad Kill Face. How's that for a good name? And now next time you go to the compressor, it's there as a preset, so you can call it up anytime you want. And people might not know this. I've had people ask, how can you have a whole effect rack saved or loaded? And it's now right here under the menu. So you can load the effect, you can save the effect, and what's really cool is the lock effect rack. How does that work?
So the lock effect rack just prevents when presets change, it doesn't load the corresponding effects rack. So it's preserving the old effect rack.
Right.
And so what that allows you to do is if you have certain effects that you think are cool, you can lock it. And another maybe non-obvious use is that you could actually turn off all the effects and then select lock effects rack. And now you are able to flip through presets with no effects on. So it's a nice way to be able to say bypass effects completely. And you might wonder, well, why would you do that? And a good reason is the Serum effects plugin. Right? So
let's do that. Yeah.
So
if we lock the effect rack with them off, now we can turn on the Serum effects there. So here's Serum the synth, and here's Serum the effects. And it says right here in the top, the effects. And what this allows you to do now is we can cycle through the presets, any presets in the Factory Voicing or any of the libraries we've released or other people have released, and it will apply these effects to this sound which has the effects turned off. And I could actually cycle through. It makes them independent of each other, right?
Exactly. So it's kind of like mix and match. You can hear any preset with any other effects chain on them that way. Independently scroll through just the effects or independently scroll through just the sound source. Yeah, it's a fun little way. And there's actually, it's pretty hidden, but I actually also added the ability to lock the oscillators. And the noise oscillator, so you can do the same thing. So if you go over to the main page on the non-effects version of Serum,
right,
you'll see on the oscillator A where the header is at the top where the power switch is,
right,
you can right-click or control-click, and you'll see Lock Module as the bottom selection there. And so what that's going to do is the same idea as the effects rack. When that's lock is enabled, now when we switch presets, that oscillator and its corresponding knobs do not change. So you can mix and match subcomponents of the preset itself.
Wow. Okay.
This locking module works for the oscillator A, B, the filter, the noise oscillator, and the sub oscillator. So you have those 5 as independent modules you can lock, and then the effects would be the 6th independent module you can lock. So that makes for some neat mix and match kind of stuff too. You could, if you like a certain oscillator and you go, oh wow, that's a cool growly sound or something.
Right.
You can lock that one and just hear what different presets sound like with that one still in place.
Okay, that's a whole lot of Easter eggs right there. So that's cool that you've got the ability to, because that's the thing that Omnisphere brought up, is the ability to lock certain components. That's here as well. So if you like how Oscillator A and the sub and the filter and the effects are, you could lock those down and then change through patches, and everything else will update. LFOs will update and so forth, but the oscillators and so forth that were locked stay locked.
Right.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, my head is full. I'm all inspired. Want to make some more Serum patches now.
Cool. Well, I'm excited. Thanks for showing that stuff off with me. I've
Yes.
got more exciting stuff on the way, so we'll have to repeat this at some point and just
Yes.
do a little quickie with some of the new stuff as it comes out over the next month or two.
Definitely. I had just a couple questions some customers asked. One of the big ones. Do you have a minute more?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. One of the big ones was as in regards to for you, what came first, music or software coding? What was it that triggered the marriage of the two? Kind of.
It's tough. I have to rewind my memory banks because they're a little bit intertwined. I grew up in Silicon Valley, so I grew up in a very computer-friendly household, and
yeah,
I'm 43 now, so it was years ago when most people didn't have computers in their room. You might remember, but as kids, it wasn't. Not everyone, the personal computer was this new thing, and people were starting to a computer at home. What a concept!
Right.
It's
not everybody's sitting around with an iPad on the sofa, right?
Right. Now it sounds even funny. The concept of PC meaning personal computer. What's a non-personal computer? It almost seems weird.
Right.
But that was the time. So we had 6 computers in the house, and that was very uncommon. I had a Commodore 64. My brother had a Commodore PET and a 286, and then 386, and then 486. All that. So in fact, I think he's even pre 286. But anyway, so grew up around whiz kid older brother who would always be coding. Even at 11, 12 years old, he was coding BBS software that was open source. This was like an 11-year-old coding open source software before it was such a thing, basically.
Right.
So I grew up, through osmosis, I got some of that. I made little ASCII-based games. I wasn't even good enough to make sprite-based games, but I made little ASCII games in BASIC on the Commodore 64.
Yeah.
And so I was into the concept, and but I never really had any applied interest. I never really thought there would be something that would be too cool to make.
Right.
So music was much more the passion. I got into synthesizers in my early teens, and Roland Alpha Juno, and then I started collecting at Fender Rhodes, and I got my first MIDI sequencer, which was Opcode Vision 1.0 on the black and white Mac, and I was really bit by that bug of collecting MIDI modules. And every day after school, I worked at a mom and pop music store, selling, and I'd take home the I had the D50, the D70, the Wave Station, which of course you're well familiar with.
Yes.
The Roland U220, Roland S330 sampler, and so I just started amassing all of the MIDI gear that I could, and I built myself a MIDI studio, brought that to college, did all my electronic music projects at home. I was the only guy who was actually in the dorm as opposed to booking studio time because all of stuff required external gear back then. You couldn't do it in the box.
Right.
And this was still in the early 90s.
Right.
And then so that was really it. And then I worked, I worked on records, and I was working 9 Inch Nails record and Perfect Circle, and worked at Avid, but as tech support, not as a programmer. And so I always thought that was stuff that should be left to wizards. I mean, it seemed like C++ and DSP.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's this mystified thing to coding that, you kind of broke that down to where it wasn't so big to you.
Yeah, I mean, I hired a mathematician for the gnarliest parts. I mean, I feel like so there's the deep inside the oscillator code. I spent about a month and a half just trying to be on the par with some of these other top synths. Yeah. And then after spending that time, I was like, you know what, I should get someone who's just really knows this stuff, because I never even took calculus, right? So this stuff's really slow to me, and I've been more and more working on my own filter types, and I understand a lot of beyond the principles. I understand a lot of the math behind it, but to make everything the utmost quality, sometimes you have to know what your strengths are and know when it's better to just find someone who's better than you to help out. But so for the most part, the programming, I mean, the majority of it is a lot of sort of tedious logic-based stuff, and I'm really good with the logic. I'm very patient with issues and problems and diagnosing problems and debugging, and so there's a lot of boring a lot of time that gets involved in doing this stuff, and it's a lot
Especially
of
the graphics, that the feedback that you have visually, I'm sure that took a lot of time to get it just right.
yeah. It's I mean it's something that you could get the result of what you hear from Serum with a inferior interface, but it wouldn't be the same synth
Right.
if it wasn't engaging to program, and if it
Right.
felt frustrating to try to make things change sonically, then you're not going to do it. And that's a big philosophy for me for just plugin design. Even before I was doing my own programming, when I was just designing plugins with other programmers,
Yeah.
workflow was really important to me because I come from that background of being the guy in the studio with a melodic idea or whatever it is in your head, and you're trying to get this idea out of your head and into the speakers and into the room.
Right.
And oh boy, I mean, if one extra mouse click can make or break something. If you want to
Yeah.
adjust a filter cutoff, but you don't see the filter cutoff knob because it's on some other page,
Yeah.
and then you have to go, right, what do I have to do to get
All
to
that effort to
knob?
do that. Yeah. Right.
And that can be really frustrating. And obviously, at the same time, you don't want just a wall of knobs with everything exposed.
Right.
So that's like always a challenge of me, is combining simplicity and power,
Right.
trying to make something that like hopefully you can stay in the creative headspace and not have to keep like reminding yourself what things are. But at the same time, not making a product that's just dumbed down to like
Right.
3 knobs or whatever it is. So
Well, it's that background that you had working in music stores. I worked in music stores. You get to where you've worked with all these synthesizers. You came more from the music side and then let the electronics and this coding side assimilate and kind of like grow into it. But you kept your reference database of everything you've done in music. I think that's what makes the most successful of these it's a musical instrument in the end. So
yeah, I attribute the success of Serum and my other plugins really to that coming
Yeah.
from being a user, I really know what to make. I mean, there's definitely more knowledgeable programmers out there, and in any field of whatever facet of the programming it is, but they don't know how to make a product that people would necessarily want to use. And it's a lot of decisions. I mean, you don't realize it. I mean, I get approached a lot of the time with people with an idea for a plugin, and they think that it's really simple or whatnot, and they can belt out a paragraph describing their idea.
Right.
But what happens is when you actually try to go implement something, all of these sub dilemmas come up. Do I want this or do I want that? And it's a lot. And you know this from sound design, and you know this from working on a song.
Yeah.
That the options are sort of start becoming infinite, and any facet that you zoom in on,
Yeah.
start realizing that this thing itself could have all of these different properties, and it's really hard to know where to draw those lines. Really hard. What are the features that are important to have? What are the features that aren't important?
Right.
And
what's going to make it too confusing to people? That confusing versus power kind of a challenge you have to deal with all the time on each module and ability of the instrument.
It's tough. It's tough to make it both simple, seemingly simple, yet powerful, and also hopefully pretty to look at.
Right.
I mean, that's the trifecta. That's really hard to hit. I mean, Ableton Live is one of my references of managing to do simplicity and power, both in a package. It blows me away, really. I mean, they've made one of the best DAW environments and one of the best live performance environments all in one application.
Yeah, I know.
Yet you're not bogged down with thousands of menu items and like tons of key commands and all that. So
what's great with Serum is that you have a lot of feedback when you change like the wave table position knob. You have instant feedback of what you're doing, and that's what really helps, I think, have the success. And you want to play with it, you want to see it do all these things to the sound. That's part of the fun, is I can manipulate things to where there's this, and then it's giving me feedback while I'm working with it, which is really positive.
I hope so. I mean, to me, that's always secondary. It's not quite eye candy, but it's somewhere secondary. Important, definitely important, but secondary to really, I think, the simplicity of navigation, right? Being able to hopefully ergonomically, or hopefully just be able to make something that's compelling to actually make sounds on. I mean, that was important to me with Serum, because my thesis going on was like, I mean, I even had friends saying, Steve, why do you want to make a synth? There's so many synths out there. Like, you can't possibly make something that's like worthwhile, essentially, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, I'm not happy with them. I'm a user of this stuff, and so I like the concept of software synthesizer. That's like one of the coolest concepts to me. But yet, all the ones that are available don't really tickle my fancy to actually make sounds with.
Right.
And so that was really the beginning thesis with Serum, which was, why am I not compelled to make sounds with these other synths, and what would help facilitate that? So, so fortunately, it's resonated with other people. I mean, I believe to be the true with music as well. If you make music, and if you really can ask yourself that same sort of question, which is like, why am I not completely blown away by the music that's out there?
Right.
And what would really just tickle my funny bone and make me like just lose my mind if I heard it on a dance floor or heard it coming out of the speakers, and aim for that. And it's the more that you satisfy yourself, that you'll find that there's a world of people out there that resonate with it too, and they go, Absolutely. Oh my God, this is blowing my mind right now.
Right.
Because finally someone gave me what I wanted.
Right.
Essentially.
They heard something that you haven't heard that before. There's a new direction. There's so much exploring inside of the Serum universe that hasn't been tapped. I mean, it's kind of gotten this big boom for the trap, dubstep thing, but it goes so far beyond that in what it can do that I hope people keep exploring and pushing to other, I'm definitely doing that with my work with Serum. And so my goodness, it goes everywhere.
Cool.
Right?
Oh, thank you.
All right. A couple more questions on this wonderful Thursday. I think we've covered most of the Easter eggs. We kind of snuck those. We snuck those in when we were talking about the update.
That's right.
Which is fine. Joel asked to email. He said, "Where does the name Extra Records come from, and will you ever change the name of your company?"
Yeah, I'm considering it, and that's a funny story there. So the idea was, Deadmau5 and I were starting. We were making music together as BSOD, and then we had a situation where we decided we needed to release the music ourselves. That we were sort of sick of like dealing with other people, the gridlock and the typical stuff that happens with labels, where you're waiting or whatever it is.
Right.
So we were like, well, let's just start our own label. Like, okay, we're gonna start a label. Well, you need a name for a label.
Right.
Okay. And then pretty much anything you can imagine is taken, right? Any word in the dictionary followed by records. Believe it or not, someone's trademarked it out there or whatnot. So we were like, well, and what should we name the label? And so I thought the word records, and I'm always like looking for puns because I like being stupid with words. And so I thought of records. What other meaning does records have besides these discs? And it has, well, databases have records, right? It's slightly different, but an entry in a database is like a record.
Right.
So I was like, well, okay, so how could we make a reference to a database? And then I just thought XFR, which is an abbreviation for transfer.
Transfer,
and it's kind of a techie term that you would use if you were a database programmer and you were transferring some records from one database to the other.
You have to transfer, and a record is a transfer from a master recording to the album itself, to the to the vinyl.
And of course, that's being called BSOD. It all seemed to make sense. It was like, oh, this is perfect. It's just sort of techie and 4 letters and just seems to really fit. Yeah. And we also weren't too worried. We were just wanting to find something that didn't exist, right? Oh, there is no company called X for Records. Great. Done. Next, now we can release some music. So it was sort of like this quick thing. And I didn't have much other thought about it. And I definitely didn't have any plans to start releasing software through it. So once I started making plugins and I had the domain and everything, it just seemed like the convenient outlet. I was like, well, I've got this URL. Why don't I just put it on this existing website and make a plugin for sale? So
there you go.
So that's worked out. I mean, it's not we're saying, well, there's records in the name, or I get a lot of demo submissions, but other than that, it's not caused any issue. Although the issues that it has caused is kind of amusing or not. It was amusing the first time, which is that XFR is also used on bank statements as an abbreviation for transfer. So people see XFR on their bank statement and they think I'm stealing their money. They're like, oh, what a $340 charge. And I was like, wasn't me, dude. Does it say XFR Records? No, it just says XFR. Well, and it's not me. So it happens like the first time it was sort of amusing, like, oh, this guy. And then the second time. So it's like, man, and people, you can just tell how angry they are in the email because they're just sure that I'm stealing their money.
Wow.
And so that's probably the most annoying part. I mean, it hasn't gotten to anyone actually like making threats against my life or anything, but still, it's I want people to think that, even if it's just a moment. And then there's a ReFX company, which is just complete coincidence, which is XFR backwards. So people think that I named XFR as some kind of joke on ReFX, but that's just complete coincidence. I mean,
there's only so many letters you can work with in the alphabet, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
How funny. So you might change the name at some point, but it's not I like extra records. It's fine with me.
I like it. I mean, you know, the biggest problems really are the bank statement one, which isn't the end of the world. It's not a reason enough to change it. There's the fact that records is in the name, but doesn't really apply to software.
Right.
And then there's the fact that no one knows how to pronounce it, right? Everyone's like, is it Xfer or Ziffer or is it transfer? And I just say Xfer because that way people can know in their mind the word.
Yeah.
More. If I said transfer, then
that doesn't match.
It doesn't. Yeah, you wouldn't even exactly.
Right. Well, last question, and then we'll let you go on your birthday because, my goodness, this is a lot of time you're taking up on your birthday. Thank you.
I've had enough. Had enough of them.
So the question is this: what's your take on both modular synthesizers? I have a couple of the people on the Facebook plugin guru page that agreed that you would be just great to do some really creative, crazy things with modular synthesizers, or iPhone, iOS, Android apps. Right. Have you thought of either of those? One's a little bit easier to access, I think, maybe than modular, but I'm just curious what you think of those two worlds. And
I've thought about both of them. I haven't seriously considered either of them. Maybe a little bit more on the iOS side. I've seriously considered just because there's, of course, existing code base that I have that with who knows exactly how much messing around I could manage to get it to run on one of those devices to some degree. So that's a little more tempting as the world overlaps with my existing world so much. Yeah. The drawbacks are I can't spread myself too thin. Like I said earlier, and that I feel like I owe it to the existing customers not to just abandon them.
Right.
So even though I've done 90 plus updates to Serum, I'm still not done. There's more to come. There's more features I want to include, and it's not that it's necessarily owed to everyone, but I have love for Serum, just like users sent me love for Serum that they have and praise.
Yeah.
As long
it's
as
growing. It's an evolutionary instrument.
As long as customers keep coming on board to keep putting food on my table, that I want to keep working on it. So there's no end in sight in a sense. There's some big stuff I'd love to add. There's some fairly big stuff that nobody even knows about that's actually in my code now and basically working, but I just need to I'm holding off to not unleash too much at once and create bugs and then not know where the bug came from and all that. So
that's exciting to know. Yeah,
so there's some major stuff under the hood that's commented out. It doesn't compile in, but they're in my code. So yeah, there's stuff that I'm excited about for the future. But back to the question, which is really mobile and modular. I mean, mobile is something that maybe at some point I'll find time to experiment a bit with. I feel a little bit, my biggest other hesitation there, besides my own time being spread too thin, is that I'm not a user myself. And so with these plugins, it's really been great because even as I've developed Serum and stuff, I've used it on songs that I've produced for other people, or I've used LFO tool religiously on mixes for other people. And so as a user of the stuff myself, or eating my own dog food, as you could say, it not only feeds back onto additional features for the thing, but I don't know, it all makes sense. With mobile, I'm not a user of mobile music making apps. I mean, my favorite one, I think, is the Moog Animoog, in terms of just something on the phone that's kind of fun if I'm walking my dog or something to kind of toy with. It just looks cool, it sounds cool, it's wavetable driven, it's neat. But I've never used it on a song, and I wouldn't even really consider going through the hoops of connecting my computer to my DAW or connecting the phone to
there's a lot involved to get it where it's kind of like trying to get sample accurate modular synths happening with the system. You got to go through hoops and use special things there as well. So
but with that said, a lot of people have said, I'd love to make wavetables when I'm on the go, or make Serum presets, and then I can copy that preset into my DAW, and I can understand the desire there. I just don't, again, it's not something that I personally find myself doing. I never have a good listening environment with the iPhone. I can never hear anything on earbuds that sounds good at all. I mean, it always sounds like there's no bass or whatever. So as I'm not a user, there's no passion there. And if there's no passion there, it makes it difficult. Because
you got to have the passion to want to even start down that.
Not interested in the paycheck, and I don't even know what that paycheck would be. But I don't even if it would be big, I don't even know if I don't think that would make a difference. And then so modular would be the other half. Really quick, I'll touch on that. I've heard some cool stuff come out of modular land. There's just so many modules and devices. So it's sort of a similar answer, which is that I don't keep up with it all.
Yeah.
I've witnessed sort of secondhand a lot of people just spin off into oblivion on collecting modules, tinkering with them, and adding more and adding more. And it's almost like chasing the holy grail of maybe this next module, maybe I'll finally make good music with this next one. Or whatever it is. I just feel like, to me, what I love about electronic music and making music is partly that it is all in the computer, and you can speak your voice and express so much with what's inside the box.
Right.
And
the immediacy of it, you know.
The total recall, the fact that you can surf through presets, that immediacy, absolutely, I agree. With modular stuff, you can do interesting stuff. Interesting sounds can come out. It's fun as a hobby to explore, but ultimately, also a lot of it, in terms of the core components, are nothing new. I mean, a lot of the older stuff is just bleeps and bloops from the 70s. You know, it's just an analog sawtooth, or basic waveform shapes, basic filter circuits, and now all of these new modules that you see tons of them flooding the market, they're all digital. But that gets really silly to me, right? Because we're getting all these digital modules that basically could be plugins. I mean, they basically are just little logic modules with little gate in and out, and this in and out, and a little little stepper gate trigger thing or whatever. It gets kind of crazy to me, because it's like, dude, these are all like would just be disposable if they're little modules in Reactor or something. You wouldn't even attach value to this. But now that it's this physical thing, you're spending $300 on this little thing that just takes one note in and fans it into 4 notes, toggling randomly or whatever. And so I wouldn't know where to begin as making something. I mean, I have been approached by people that wanted me to make a Cthulhu version for modular, but again, I don't even know how quite that would work exactly. And
so take one note and have it read some sort of a map of chord changes for each note and all that.
Yeah, I don't even know how that would exactly equate, because you
need a lot of oscillators to play that.
That's right, exactly. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like I don't see the connection. And so long story short, I think analog stuff's cool. I mean, for people that like to get into it, I think you can, a lot of the flaws are what makes it beautiful to me. A lot of the unexpectedness is what makes it cool. Freaky, feedbacky, weird things can definitely happen, and you can say there's no way that a plugin sounds like this, or there's no way I'd get a plugin to sound like this. In a way, I technically disagree. I think that anything you do in the analog domain, in theory, could be done in the digital domain. But it does require that you have enough horsepower to do that, and it requires that you know what it is that you're trying to accomplish in the first place. Which, if you came across it accidentally, isn't going to happen anyway. So, and the virtual modular stuff that's coming out right now and has been out, it doesn't impress me too much. Like it doesn't quite have that essence of the flaw or character.
Well, there's this raw nature. My modular, I have like one of my favorite things is actually these little Atari chips, little single space. It switches between the 8 different Atari noises, and I have 2 of them so I can be in stereo. And stupid things like that. It's great for that raw nature thing, but trying to get that captured and have that essence in software, I don't know. I'd go to Serum first, I think, for trying to get just raw waveforms that had beautiful waveforms in your face to work with. I mean, there's a lot you can do starting here before going to the cable patch, then get,
Yeah, and there's a lot of course, you can just capture raw waveforms off of the modular, which I know you've done.
Yes.
I'm sure you've done. And so
we should point on that. We didn't mention that. So just so everybody knows, if you turn on an oscillator, if you hit the pencil tool, wait.
Serum effects.
This is on the effects? No, but this is for the oscillator for capturing the...
you need the audio input to be able to capture. And so you need to use effects version.
Oh, that's the trick with the Serum effects. That's one of the things... Because Serum effects actually has the oscillators right here to work with. And if the note latches on, it latches in forever. If it's off, it doesn't. But from here, if you hit the pencil tool, because there is an audio input... This is one of the differences between this and the standalone synth version of Serum is capture allows you to play audio in, and it will now start recording what it gets on its input as a wavetable. Immediate creating of a wavetable based on something outside of itself, which is great.
Yeah, you can do the real-time capture. Personally, I find that the best way really to import sounds into wavetable is to use some kind of tuner if it's an analog source or whatever, and get it to an exact note that you know.
Right.
And the ideal one really is actually G sharp, funny enough, because G sharp, if you're at 44.1 at least, G sharp is really, it lines up very well with a divisible number of samples.
Right.
And that's the whole idea, is all of these different pitches on our piano versus our sampling rate. You really want something that's going to line up as close as possible to an exact number of samples.
Right.
So you can actually do this in Serum. If you go to the wavetable editor and you see where it says enter formula, you can type note names there. So you type like G sharp -1 or G sharp 0, say.
Okay.
And you'll see that it will then convert that, like a calculator, into a number of samples.
Right.
So it'll say split at 849 samples, G sharp 0 and 1 cents. So 1 cent is pretty close. It's actually, I think, a little less than 1 cent, but it's rounding up there to show us.
Right.
And then so G sharp -1, I believe, is right around whatever that is, 1798, I think, samples. Almost exactly a perfect number of samples. So it's just.
So if you're going to do it to perfect samples. There you go.
So
G sharp 1 is the best note.
G sharp -1 is 1699 is the number of samples. You could either type in 1699 or you can type in G sharp -1. It's the same thing.
Right.
And then it says G sharp 1 and 0 cents, right? So that's like perfect. So what that means is so if you have a sound recorded at this low G sharp, it's around 26 hertz. So it's like the lowest G sharp, basically. But that's going to be like the highest quality, essentially, because you're going to have no drift left to right.
There's no interpolation required.
As the wave cycles go.
Right.
And yeah, hopefully no fading on the edges required, or if it's a short sound, you still might want to use the interpolation to create frames where they don't exist. But there's going to be none of this drift where you see the whole waveform kind of scroll left or right as you change the WT pause.
Right.
And that just makes for consistency as you're changing through the frames. So just for that consistency's sake, that's my recommendation. But point being, back to more of a blanket statement, you can type in any note name here into this formula editor and then just drag the sample in. Right. And that's just an easy way to capture sounds. To me, that's the most convenient. It's just record the thing as a file, drag it in, with typing in the note name.
Optimize the audio file in an editor maybe before you bring it in as a wavetable, so it's all normalized and no dead space at the beginning and all that if you want.
Sure, exactly. You can do all of that in Serum as well. It's sort of a little editor there. You can remove the blank tables, but you're right. Yeah, especially if you have a bunch, trim that off first and then drag that in. That's the easiest way, just to get any sound imported in kind of perfectly. Is just explicitly tell Serum there, this is a C, and then drag it in, and it'll say, oh, it's a C, and then it splits it perfectly for you.
Awesome. There's a lot of power. Well, we will do this with other future updates because it's fun to just check in. Fun to get to say hi. So
yeah, definitely. Let's do it.
All right, we'll get back to work. Everybody enjoy the new update. Send ideas you have to Steve. If there's issues or questions, he does reply. Or, just be on the lookout for what's coming next. Awesome. Okay, thank you, Steve.
Cool. Thank you, John.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yay!
Nice one.